Good evening from Boston College. My name is Tara Pisani-Garreau. I'm an associate professor of the practice in the Department of Earth Environmental Sciences, and I direct the Environmental Studies program. And my area of expertise is in agroecology and sustainable agriculture. I welcome you to the Show at 6, BC and the Common Good. The Show at 6 features friends and members of the BC community discussing a range of issues affecting our world today. Topics include how the BC community is responding to the effects of COVID-19, to the enduring challenges of the marginalized, to our own resiliency and solidarity, and to the upbuilding of human dignity around the world. The show is based on the central insight of the common good. That is, that the resources that humanity has and needs must be shared equitably. Tonight's show is on sustainability, a term that made its international debut in the 1987 Brundtland Commission report entitled Our Common Future, where it was used to describe a system of economic development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Thus, sustainability, which is built on the three pillars of environmental health, social health, and economic viability, includes a dimension of intergenerational equity around the common good. At 6:40, my co-host and I will begin to ask our guests questions from the audience. You can pose a question before 6:40 using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please identify yourself by name and relationship to Boston College. I'm delighted to co-host tonight's session with my colleague and friend, Professor Praveen Kumar, who is an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Social Work. Dr. Kumar's research examines economic, social, and behavioral responses to environmental changes that impact the well-being of poor communities in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. His research is at the intersection of poverty, climate change, and clean energy. Welcome to the show at 6, Praveen.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And let's start the session by introducing our guests. Let's start with Bruce Dixon. So Bruce has been working at Boston College for 11 years and has been overseeing the Office of Sustainability for the past 2 years. Prior to his employment at BC, Bruce received most of his training from the Pipefitters Union Local 537 as a licensed HVAC technician. He also received a certificate for CFC qualification to properly remove and dispose of refrigerants and performed predictive maintenance. At BC, Bruce has worked in facilities services as an HVAC mechanic and in facilities management as the energy specialist. In 2014, he was certified as an existing building commissioning professional, and in 2018, he was appointed as sustainability and energy specialist. And he will receive his Bachelor of Arts from the Woods College of Advancing Studies at the end of the upcoming fall semester. Welcome, Bruce. We also have with us Julie Stelmazik. She is the manager of regional and sustainable food systems at BC Dining, where she oversees sustainability initiatives and regional sourcing strategies that advance the New England food vision, calling for 50% of food production from the region by 2060. Her role supports procurement and culinary teams in bringing more regionally and sustainably grown foods on the menus, while also working to increase awareness around food systems and waste minimization among students, staff, and faculty. Julie also serves as co-chair of the Education Working Group for the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, a 60-member working group of scholars and campus dining leaders. She has a BA in Environmental Studies and International Affairs from Northeastern University and is nearing completion of her MBA from our very own Carroll School of Management.
Anne-Marie Green graduated in 2020 as a political science major and environmental studies minor. She served as student sustainability manager for Boston College Dining from fall of 2018 to spring of 2020. Her thesis was on recycling and global waste flows, and she worked on many waste issues at Boston College Dining. Outside of BC, she interned with Boston City Hall's recycling director on the city's zero waste plan in 2019, and is currently an incoming fellow at U.S. Public Interest Research Group on the Right to Repair campaign, which promotes reuse and repair legislation. Welcome, Anne-Marie. Sandra Waddick is Galligan Chair of Strategy, Carroll School Scholar of Corporate Responsibility, and Professor of Management at Boston College's Carroll School of Management. She's published over 150 papers and 15 books, including Transforming Towards Life-Centered Economies, coming out in 2020, and Intellectual Shamans, a 2014 publication. Professor Waddick has received multiple Lifetime Achievement Awards. Her current research interests include transformational system change, memes and narrative, flourishing life, intellectual shamanism, management, education, and wisdom, among others. Welcome to the show, our wonderful panelists this evening.
Thanks, Tara. Let's dive in with some specific questions. And this question is for you, Bruce. I have always been very curious, where has BC made the biggest strides in sustainability? And also, what do you find are common misconceptions about sustainability in and around campus?
Well, thank you, Dr. Kumar. And it's wonderful to be here and to be able to promote sustainability to our BC community. I think the biggest strides that BC was able to do in regards to sustainability it's actually threefold. First is the Memorandum of Understanding with Eversource. This reduces our electrical consumption by 2 million kWh. So kWh is the metric we use to measure energy consumption. This created energy conservation measures on our campus. So that was the driver for, on the energy side of the house, to create energy, to reduce our energy consumption on campus. The second is the mandate in the institutional master plan that calls for all LEED certified buildings be a minimum silver or higher. LEED provides a holistic approach to sustainability for buildings. The third is, and this is the one that not many people know about, but for the past few years, BC has purchased green power from the energy grid to offset its energy consumption or electrical consumption on campus. As far as the misconceptions, I know of one misconception that I don't mind talking about, and it has to do with the fact that some students and some people, our community, I'll say in general, they feel that BC doesn't have or doesn't care too much about sustainability. It's just really the opposite. Just because there's no visible signs of sustainability all over our campuses doesn't mean that BC doesn't care about sustainability. My previous comments confirm that there is a commitment from senior leadership to promote and look for ways to develop sustainable projects that work on our campus.
Great. Thank you so much. And we have a similar question for Julie, who also holds a sustainability management type of position at BC. And so what progress has BC Dining made towards meeting the New England food vision, which is a really ambitious goal of 60% local or 50% local procurement by 2060? And then also, what are some common misconceptions that students or staff and faculty have about the food system and how Boston College connects to it?
Yeah, so I'll tackle the first one.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm excited to share some of our work at BC Dining. So in terms of the New England Food Vision, it is an ambitious goal, and I believe that they're actually rewriting the New England Food Vision to take account for some of the more recent issues around racial equity, which I'm excited to see. Actually, they're doing that this year. But in terms of regional food sourcing, we have been able to source around 30% of all of the food that we buy to serve the meals at dining. Which, by the way, are 4 million meals a year. So it's important to think about that in the context of farm to institution and the power of institutional buyers. And so, yeah, around 30% of the food that we purchase of our food budget is coming from New England food producers and sustainable and responsible suppliers. And in terms of vegetables, 20% of the vegetables that we purchase are from New England family farms. So it's 2020, we're at 20%. We've got a ways to go. And some of the challenges that folks might not know about is it's not always around price, although often it is. It's also distribution, the way that our food system is set up around these national and global supply chains. It's really difficult for us to prioritize a local lettuce that might be twice the price as a lettuce that's coming from the big ag farms out in California, just as one example. And then in terms of myths, the second question, or things that students might not know about sustainability, I would say there's a whole lot of things that they don't see in terms of the menu process that our culinary team thinks about. Specifically, we have a program that's called Fresh to Table, and the 5 letters of FRESH, I'll say them now, they stand for fairly traded, regional, equitable, sustainable, and healthy. And so we think of those kind of 5 principles as signposts or guiding principles when we think about sourcing and we think about menus. But we always have to balance what students want to eat. So it is a challenge. So if you care about sustainability, if you care about local sourcing, let us know, because it helps us make the case to put more of that on the menus. And then another thing that they might not know about is that we have food waste trackers, these smart scales in all the kitchens that students don't see. They're called Lean Path smart scales. And so we actually track and weigh all of our food waste back of house in an effort to minimize it. And we're able to convert that to greenhouse gas emissions. So those are some things students might not know about.
That's really interesting. There's a common theme between what you and Bruce just said, that there's a lot that's happening behind the scenes that people don't always know. Sometimes there are places that that do that front of house and make it visible so people can see it. Like there's Anne-Marie, you read about the Smurf facility out in California, Santa Monica, that's like recycling urban water. And so you can see the process right there, how it converts this stormwater into to not quite potable standards, but something that's cleaned up water that can be reused in landscaping. So that's sort of an interesting thought of like how much is visible and how visibility can sometimes help to educate and let people know. And I know that one thing that happened over the past few years is the increase in signage around composting. So whereas before there was a lot of composting happening back of house, not visible, now it's a little bit more, it's more visible in McElroy. And so students are starting to see that we do compost. I'm hearing less like misunderstanding around composting, and I think it's because of the bins in McElroy.
Yeah, and
do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'll just add one quick point about that, because you said McElroy. If students from last year remember, there used to be a big giant wall that blocked the recycling and trash bins. You'd have to walk behind it. So we were able to actually remove that wall, and so you have to see all of the recycling and compost bins to dispose of your waste, and people watch you. And so Anne-Marie maybe can back me up on this, but we actually noticed that by just taking that wall down, that students, maybe because they knew that someone would see them not recycling or throwing their plate accidentally in the trash, and so we actually had better diversion rates and less loss of metal silverware and plates just by removing that wall. So you can design spaces to encourage sustainability and transparency as well.
That's great. Well, thanks. That is a perfect segue for Anne-Marie. So we wanted to ask Anne-Marie, you've done so much work in recycling and in terms of research and internships. What have you learned through your work? Can you tell us, and also tell us a little bit about how you got specifically interested into recycling?
Right. Yes. Thank you. And I just want to say that I'm super excited and honored to be here amongst you all. But I think I really developed a specific interest in waste and recycling the summer after my freshman year. I went on a BC-sponsored class to India, and kind of talking about visibility. India doesn't have a 100% formalized waste management system, so the waste created from plastics was really visible, and it just made me realize how much we're shielded from so much of that in the United States, both our consumption in terms of materials as well as energy, all of those environmental impacts we often don't see. And so that really got me interested in waste issues in the US and at BC specifically. I think Julie remembers how I came to BC Dining is because I had this crazy obsession with the single-use plastic utensils that were so ubiquitous. So that kind of got me in the door there, but BC Dining was so supportive and responsive to reducing plastic that with the help of Julie and other interns, I was able to get the Green to Go campaign underway, which is the reusable container program that we have now, as well as some other initiatives involved in waste. And so I feel like I've learned so much over my work at BC Dining and my research, kind of questioning our institutions of recycling and where it goes. And kind of the more that I unravel, the mystery behind all of our waste and, the complex political and economic dynamics, it's just the more it makes me so energized and motivated to keep working in that space. So.
And Anne-Marie, in your research, did you figure out where recyclables that are not being accepted in China and elsewhere, where is that hanging out right now? What happens to our—
So actually, so it's interesting that I mentioned India in the beginning because, India is now a country that we're sending some of our paper and plastic recyclables to, but we're mostly sending it now after China kind of shut down its operation, mostly sending them to Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. So there's some serious environmental justice questions there, I think. And also kind of just that fact itself, brings a question to, the ethical involvements in recycling and is it really being handled in the most safe and environmentally responsible way? So, there's more of the rabbit hole to go down there.
You have to think a little bit more besides just popping it in the bin, thinking someone's taking care of it. That's the most sustainable thing. And, it may not, the stream of that may be really different than what we expect.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. That was awesome. And I'm going to pick that thread. And so Anne-Marie really talked about ethics, environmental justice, recycling. All of these are kind of key topics of discussion. So I'm going to quickly zoom out. And I have a question for Sandra. Sandra, you have been working in this corporate responsibility space now for decades. So I'm curious to know, how does corporate responsibility incorporate sustainability? And is it a growing area of business?
Oh, yes. First, I want to say thank you for inviting me to Tara and Praveen. It's really exciting to be here. Yeah, I have been working in this area for many years now. I've been at Boston College since 1986. Corporate social responsibility, or we call CSR, has been very prominent in companies since around the 1990s, especially around the mid-1990s, when the internet sort of came online and it became clear to companies that their behaviors could be kind of broadcast very broadly. And then in the early 2000s, the CSR kind of began to shift more towards sustainability. And so what you see is many companies adopting sustainability programs. And so you do have companies doing that. The problem is, as I see it, is both with CSR and corporate sustainability programs, is they tend to be not as central to companies. So it's like, okay, we're going to do our business, whatever the business is, we're going to keep doing our business. And then we're going to add in either a CSR program or a sustainability program, or sometimes both. Many times both, in fact, especially for bigger companies. And those sustainability programs are sort of on the side. They're not necessarily core to how the company does business. And so maybe about 10 years ago, I realized that corporate social responsibility, CSR, or sustainability as an add-on to what companies were doing is not going to get the world where we need to be, because there's many reports out now that really talk about sort of the imperative to do things quite differently than we're doing them now. And so I started working with some colleagues on the issue of transformation, system transformation, so at a very macro level. And when we think about companies in the context of needing to transform, that has to do with how they operate their business model, not just adding something to say, okay, well, now we're doing this philanthropy program or we're doing this sustainability program and we're recycling. It's about how you make the products that you're making, how you deliver the services that you're making, and what kinds of sustainability measures are you embedding in companies. And you don't see enough companies yet doing that. There are a couple. One of the big ones is Unilever Corporation, which is really, I think, working very hard to do that. And that's a very big consumer supply chain. And oddly enough, Walmart, which has lots of problems around its community relations, its employee relations, its labor relations, and all kinds of other issues, has actually adopted a fairly significant sustainability program. And because it has so many suppliers, it can drive that sustainability initiative down into its supply chain as well. So yeah, very interesting question. Thank you.
There's one small piece of thought that I would want to really kind of, if you could lay on those thoughts. How do you, you mentioned about Unilever, you mentioned about Walmart. So how do you ensure that these bigger corporations specifically practice sustainability? Especially, is there like a kind of an accountability measure to kind of explore that they are practicing sustainability? If you could briefly lay your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of different ways that needs to happen and does happen. Back in the 1990s, when CSR began to emerge, also along with that began to what I call an infrastructure around CSR and sustainability also began to emerge. And so there are things like the UN Global Compact, which companies join and state that they're going to live up to a certain set of principles. There are all kinds of sustainability initiatives and stewardship initiatives that, depending on what your industry is, that companies say they're going to live up to. There are certification programs. One of the issues around the way companies are managed today is that there are huge supply chains all around the world, and if company might say, I'm being very, very responsible in my supply chain, which includes both how people are treated in the supply chain and how the environment is treated. And yeah, no one trusts that. So there are certification programs to monitor that. There is something called the Global Reporting Initiative, which companies report not just their financial performance, but what's called their ESG performance, their environmental, social, and governance performance. And and they do that according to a set of standards that's global. And what's coming onto the scene, and probably will be here, I'd say within the next 5 to 10 years, is integrated reporting, which asks for companies not just to produce a financial report, but to produce a report that links together this ESG type of reporting and their financial reporting. And I think those are very exciting kinds of developments because they force companies to think very differently about issues like sustainability.
It sounds like that these sort of new business models could learn a lot from organic certification, which is a very high level of accountability, like very stringent on the regulations. And there's record keeping. An organic certified a specialist needs to come and verify, check the books, and do a tour of the farm. It's an incredible amount of work, but what's interesting, as most people probably know from the prices in the grocery store, is that people are willing to pay more typically for organic produce. So you get this label, and that label really means something. But as we've discussed in some of our classes, Anne-Marie, that organic label doesn't incorporate a social justice component to it. So it meets the environmental sustainability, it meets the economic viability because people can make more money, but it doesn't quite tackle farm workers' rights and fair labor practices and things like that aren't embedded in that label. So there are other labels for that, but there's definitely a lot of accountability, which has been very helpful to move the agriculture industry to a different place where sustainable practices are economic practices and better for the environment.
If you want to really move the system, you have to change things like public policy. You have to change expectations of corporations so that not just one corporation is doing it, because there are costs associated with some of these activities, and there's not necessarily a competitive advantage to doing it. Sometimes there is. There can be a reputational advantage, and there can also be cost savings. But if I'm a company and I'm incurring more costs than my competitors, then I have no incentive to do that. So you have to level out the playing field so that all companies have to meet those same standards in some way.
Well, and speaking of system changes, we've all experienced a massive system change in the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we'd like to ask you, how has the pandemic challenged sustainability initiatives? And how has it also created more opportunities for sustainability? And I want to sort of give Julie an opportunity to start off on this one, because I know that dining had to like pivot so quick in terms of volume of food purchasing and how you distributed food. So we'd love to hear like your take on the challenges and opportunities with sustainability with the COVID-19.
Yeah, so the food system has been greatly impacted, as many industries, by COVID. I would say, so just so everyone knows, back in March when everyone left campus, we shrunk from 20,000 meals a day to 400. So if you think about all of these suppliers that were, kind of trusting us as a partner, as a buyer, it completely changed, right? And so we had to pivot immediately. And so really our operators, our team of managers and chefs were able to completely pivot to a new operational model. And so, yeah, sustainability definitely took a back seat. I would say, they obviously were prioritizing safety of staff, who were still on campus, and the few students that remained and staff who were eating in the dining halls. And our whole team spent all of June and May really making a plan for the fall in preparation for students being on campus and getting ready for that. So sustainability definitely took a back seat, but that's why they have me to poke them up, poke. And so it was top of mind for me. And personally, I see sustainability as more important now than ever, because we're seeing the fractures in the system just break open. And so, so I luckily have a really supportive boss, Beth Emery, our director. And so I put together this document with her on making a case for sustainability in times of COVID, both for, conversations with other people, but also to kind of reaffirm to ourselves the importance and the priority. And so we have found some, I don't know if I want to call them opportunities, but we've found a new focus on really prioritizing sustainability initiatives that also have cost savings, because we are part of BC. Most students coming in don't know that we are self-operated, so we are not a food service management company like an Aramark or Sodexo. We are all employees of BC. But we do operate like a business because we don't take any tuition dollars. Our budget is completely separate from tuition. And so, we can't cost the school any money. And so obviously the students who left got their money back for room and board. And so we had none of our operations that we normally would have over the summer. And so we could not push for any kind of more costly initiatives. So an example would be food waste. The EPA says that for every $1 invested in food waste, there's a $14 return on that investment. And so we already had these Lean Path machines, but we maybe lost some of the energy that we initially had around them when we launched them in 2013. So we have a new food waste task force that we've been able to re-energize around food waste reduction. And then we actually have been able to pivot away from single-use plastic, which will unfortunately be increasing because of COVID, single-use containers. And we found a less expensive compostable product of a compostable fiber that is going to a biodigester in Charlestown. So we've found some initiatives that are less costly, and we've tried to maintain the level of local and sustainable food purchases that we were already buying.
And you're supporting the local biodigester, so that's really cool too.
That's right. Yeah, we're feeding it food waste. Yeah.
Other thoughts on this from anyone else? Opportunities?
From my perspective, when everything happened, when we closed in March, it was very disappointing. I know the students were extremely disappointed. They had plans on Earth Day, Arbor Day. We had plans in our office for that, and things changed dramatically for us. But the way I look at it is it's an opportunity for us to be able to engage with folks that we would normally engage with due to travel, due to distance. I know in environmental studies you had a speaker virtually who I believe was in Alaska. Is that correct, Tara?
Yeah.
And that's a great opportunity. We don't know if that person would have been able to make it to Massachusetts, nor if we could afford to have them come. So we looked at that in our office, and we felt that the great thing about it is to be able to pull in some very talented folks that may be far away. And that's what we're trying to do in the fall. Also, since we all have to be socially distant from others all the time when we're out and about with folks, my office connected with the Department of Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. And what we're gonna do is have an info session that will explain all the different parks, trails, forests in Massachusetts that students can go to, especially those students that are not familiar with the area. So we've been able to use this pandemic to actually bring about a positive and also be able to help inform and engage with our students differently.
Great, Bruce. And I would want to have your thoughts as well on the COVID-19 situation. I'm going to extend this question that Tara just put on. We have seen with this pandemic that it has yet again shows the disparities in incidence rate and infection across different racial groups. And the data itself has shown that disproportionately high rates of infection in Black and minority Americans. So this kind of really corroborates this routine claim that there could be absolutely no environmental justice without racial justice. So against this backdrop, I would like to have your thoughts on how should we really shape sustainability initiatives at the universities and also by extension in our communities to ensure that racial justice is integrated in the sustainability endeavor.
You're asking me, right?
Yeah, Sandra, you can go ahead.
Yeah. As you know, and when Pope Francis released Laudato Si, he linked those two intimately. And I think that was a very powerful message for people. And there's a lot of sort of resistance to change in the system. And the question is, can we change and how do we change? And one of the things that COVID-19 showed us immediately was that we can change when we have the willpower to do it, when we have the political will and we have the incentive and the need. And so we've seen massive changes in terms of government support, in terms of people's attitudes towards government, in terms of the way, in terms of the way businesses are operating. And look at Boston College. I mean, we went remote within a week, within 2 days, people had to transform their classes. And even this fall, classes will be massively different from the way they used to be. Now, one of the interesting things I think is if you think about the fact that assuming people can get access to the internet, which I think needs to be a real imperative, things like education can be a lot more accessible to people all over the place. And BC can certainly play a role in making sure that that happens. And one of the things that has happened to my work over the last 4 months is as soon as COVID hit, a group of people that I've been working with in something called the SDG Transformations Forum started to develop an initiative that we're calling Bounce Beyond. Very early stages still. We've been working on it for 4 months. But just today we realized we've got our documents ready now. And the idea is to not try to get the system, particularly the economic system, to return to the way it used to be, which has created both the inequality that we're facing in the world today and the sustainability problems that we're facing. But to think differently about how we generate a new type of economic framing and that orients us towards what I'm calling stewardship of the whole, where the whole is the whole community or the whole planet. Because this is the first time we live in the era of the Anthropocene now. And that means that human beings' activities are literally affecting climate and literally affecting how we live in the world. And once we recognize that, we realize that if it's the current system that got us there, and it is, then we need to think about doing things very differently and taking care of things at planetary scale as well as at the community scale and the regional and local scales. So think about how do we bring about this new system, and that's through all kinds of mechanisms that are accessible to anyone. Activism, you've heard of Extinction Rebellion. You can go out and march on the streets. We saw all the protests about racism and inequality. Fundamentally, even last year, I was in Chile when the protests broke out in Santiago. I was there that day. I got caught up in it and had to walk back to my hotel. And that was about inequality and sustainability. And then you saw similar protests all around the world. So people are beginning to wake up and realizing there's power to be had, and that we just simply cannot continue business as usual and meet the challenges of the era.
Great, thanks, Sandra. So I think the key words, what I will draw from your response is, we really have to think about really kind of modifying the businesses as usual scenario, activism, universal access to digital literacy, and so on and so forth, are quite an initiative or insights really to really think about responding to this particular piece. Any other thoughts that we could have on this from the other panelists?
Anne-Marie?
Yeah, in terms of systems change, like you were talking about, I think that it's not possible under our current economic model to have a completely sustainable society. I think that's become clear. And I think it's going to take sacrifices, especially sacrifices of convenience. We've used kind of recycling as a crutch for our overconsumption. And I think that there's some serious environmental justice issues involved in recycling, and also racial justice issues. A lot of our incinerators are located in low-income communities or communities that are predominantly of color. And so it's not so easy. It's just as, okay, you use a plastic water bottle, you recycle it. And it's not even as easy as, okay, avoid a plastic straw and you save a sea turtle. I think that it's going to take some serious scrutiny of our lifestyles and our economic system in order to really get to a healthy, sustainable place that we need if we want to continue living in the planet that we know.
I'm curious to hear too from Julie and Bruce maybe of what are your thoughts on sort of the social justice, racial equality component of sustainability? Because from my own experience, it feels like it's something that's not as integrated into the missions of sustainability, not as easily addressed as looking at, for example, like cost-cutting measures, right? Or like that this is going to have less pollution, less CO2. I feel like it's challenging society much more deeply, and we're so slow to make that change. What are your thoughts as people who work in sustainability in this? Is it getting the right coverage and attention that it deserves?
Bruce, do you want to start? You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay. So I can't tell you how many times I've been told that my job's just about helping people recycle. And systems, there's a reason that food systems is part of my job title, as many people in sustainability, because it's part of a complex system, and people are part of that system. and the essential workers that we rely on to grow our food and package our food and process it and deliver it are part of that system. Immigrants are part of that system. And so we, so I think from our perspective in dining, we've been thinking a lot about this issue. And I would say it's been validating in some ways that finally folks who maybe haven't made those connections are now starting to connect the two and think of sustainability beyond just the planet, which includes people, but the people and the planet, right? That there's this connection between social, environmental, and health issues. And food is the space that I'm in, and so I see it as connecting all of these. In terms of a department, we've been thinking a lot about not just our sourcing. We already had set goals to source from women and minority-owned businesses, but now we're thinking a lot about specifically trying to elevate Black-owned businesses. We're also having conversations internally as a team about our staff members who are the majority of our 600 employees, 250 full-time, are people of color. So we are the most diverse department on campus. And so there's been a lot of listening and conversations internally. We're not making any big public statements. We're really kind of reflecting internally and thinking about how do we create a more inclusive dining experience for the students, staff, and faculty, but also our employees in dining. It's not an easy thing to talk about, but we're trying to push ourselves.
Thank you, Julie.
Great.
Yeah,
Bruce. Go ahead, Bruce. And then we're going to get into some questions from the audience. So.
Okay, real quick. The one thing about that, first of all, I want to say that we stewards of the environment should be including everyone at the table. Everyone should have a say as to how they are able to reduce global warming and reduce energy consumption. I think that what happens a lot is minority communities get left by the wayside when it comes to that. And my goal is to bridge that gap, to be able to talk to the urban beekeeper that is raising bees and providing awareness, but just has a small little pocket, to be able to shed light on that, be able to shed light on other groups. There's one consultant that I know of who has done some great work with nonprofit companies, nonprofit corporate organizations in sustainability. And not many people, he kind of like just floats under the radar, which is fine for him, but because he's a person of color, a lot of people that are people of color, young people, they don't see the value. They don't see people like myself in positions like where I'm at. So I try my best to bridge the gap, and I'm trying to do that in different aspects. One thing I wanted to say real quick is last year I participated in, there's a compost program called Oscar in the city of Boston. And what we would do is they provided a tutorial on how to compost, pretty simple. So I looked at it and everything. I kind of knew most of it, but I looked at it and see what they wanted us to do. So I did that. I went to various places. And it actually I did it by accident. If I was near an area, I saw an area on a map, I would go and find a bin and I would dispose of my compost in the compost bin. What I noticed is in the more, the areas that were more diverse, the compost bins were neat, they were organized, the right compost was in these bins. When I went to the more minority section of town, actually the compost bin turned into another waste receptacle, which was sad to see. It actually, be quite honest, it hurt me because here I am trying to do the right thing and going to a neighborhood, a minority neighborhood, and seeing that showed me that there's no one's speaking, no one's connecting with these folks. So that's what I would like to be able to do, is to bridge that gap and connect with folks to help them understand and to provide awareness about sustainability everywhere.
Bruce, I think we could supply some students to do some of that work this coming year. I think we could start an initiative. That sounds like a wonderful project to do. And this kind of leads us to our great question from our audience. This is from Christopher Russo, who should sound familiar to you, who graduated in 2019. He's a former EcoPledge leader, and he asks, would you tell us a bit about how student groups will work with BC Dining, the Office of Sustainability, and others in this new landscape? What are you prioritizing this upcoming year? I don't know, whoever wants to take a crack at that.
Julie, do you want me to talk about the SAC a bit?
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, so thanks for your question, Chris. Something that we developed in the past 2 years, hosted by BC Dining, what is a Sustainability Action Committee, the SAC. So it's a coalition of all of the student sustainability groups on campus. You have EcoPledge, Climate Justice, Real Foods, Bike BC, anything that has to do with sustainability. And so we formed a forum there. And so obviously every group has different priorities, but I think things that we've talked about in the past are integrating more usables into the dining hall, stuff that dining can do, which unfortunately might be rolled back because of COVID. But so that's an exciting platform that I hope continues next year.
I'll just add, we this summer hired a food justice fellow because of the need for that. And we had students, our interns, our sustainability interns, were certainly working on equity issues. The FRESH, if you remember earlier, the E stands for equity. And so it's part of our initiatives. But we maybe didn't do such a great job of really connecting all the pieces of how we're already promoting and pursuing equity. But also how we can maybe be better and push ourselves to be better. And so we're hoping to continue that position this fall. And Chris, it's nice I can't see you, but it's nice for you to be here. And I would say, I really hope that EcoPledge and Real Food BC and Climate Justice, and of course, Bruce's Office of Sustainability, I hope that we can all continue to work together and think about how we can take into consideration COVID and continue sustainability and continue to make it a priority.
Thanks. And Julie, you alluded to this food packaging systems, and you just now mentioned on COVID-19. So there is a question from Sebastian Kota, first-year student, that given the circumstances of COVID-19 and how takeout food and food packaging are more common now, do you believe this will create a setback with the sustainability efforts that have made a lot of progress already?
Well, I just want to say that we have actually confirmed that the CDC and the FDA do not say that reusables are not safe to use. So we can continue to use reusables because of the extra staff that we will need to pivot to the new operations, which students will see when they come in the fall, around physical distancing and whatnot. We won't be able to offer reusables in the fall. And I'm doing my best to make sure it's not a setback. So as I said, we've shifted from single-use plastic to compostable. We will also be selling our bamboo utensils and encouraging students to bring their own utensils, which maybe perhaps is a safer way to eat during COVID instead of single use. We won't have the refillable water stations, of course, but you can fill up your bottle at home. So maybe, this is an opportunity for us all to be more conscious of the things that we touch and consume and use and throw away, and the people that have to then continue, to dispose of that. So I'm hopeful, but yes, we will have some inevitable setbacks in the short term.
I want to kind of direct this particular question as well to Sandra. Sandra, you've been working with this corporation. So do you really foresee, is there possibility that corporations, or it will be a challenge for smaller corporations on the grounds of sustainability efforts because of this pandemic?
Oh, I think, yes, probably. I think I think all big organizations are struggling with what to do, and smaller ones have been hit really, really hard by having to shut down, and they don't have the sort of backup resources that a larger corporation might have in order to sustain themselves for longer periods of time, which is why the government's assistance has been crucial to those smaller companies. So I do think that's kind of a problem. It's also a problem for them to just simply learn about and adopt these measures. I mean, one of the things, I mean, we're an educational institution. It just seems to me that as Boston College thinks about this, moving forward in this, that we ought to be thinking about how we build in issues of equity and sustainability into not just a few courses that are in the environmental studies program, but into all of our courses. We have many, I mean, the School of Management is a prime example where, you know, we could make this a central aspect of how we teach about managing. And then spread that out. We have a lot of students coming into school management now from across the university taking the, they can get a minor now in some of the management courses. If sustainability and equity were part of all of our courses, you know, as appropriate, but certainly thinking about marketing in terms of sustainability, thinking about how you account for full cost accounting and things like that, these could be core to how we do business as an institution, and you know, building that into, you know, readings in an English course, for instance, or political science courses. I mean, I can just see that it would be conceivable that as an educational institution we could take on these challenges and really begin to think through how we build our curriculum, that we're educators.
You know, I want to throw out too, for folks who are interested in the diversity of courses being offered at BC that cover environmental topics. In the environmental studies program, if you go to our website and click on courses, we have all the ones listed for fall. They come from a wide range of departments. So it's really exciting to see that sort of growth. And we work hard just to try to keep up with the new courses that are coming up all the time. So definitely check those out. Bruce, we have two questions. I think they're kind of related to each other, so I'm gonna try to pitch them both to you at the same time. The first one's from Tom Childs, Vice Provost for Research and Academic Planning, and he asks, what are the percentage breakdowns of different types of materials recycled on campus, if you have those numbers? And then the second question, this comes from John McGrath, BC ITS. What are some sustainability aspects that were implemented in our newer projects, such as Schiller, the Cannell Rec Center, and the new baseball softball facility? And you have to unmute yourself.
As far as the first question is concerned, I don't have the breakdown. However, feel free to email me at bruce.dixon at bruce.dixon
at bc.edu.
and I'd be happy to provide the information. What I do know is that since COVID-19 reared its ugly head and we lost students, I do know that we actually have increased our recycling rate. We're actually roughly around a 55% diversion rate, which is incredible. We were hovering around 30. Actually, we were celebrating because we were around 35 to 37% diversion rate. And then all of a sudden we shot up, which is a testament to our facility services people that have been still doing a good job, as well as our folks in dining, our partners in dining that are still doing the right thing. And just because no one's around, that doesn't mean, or the students are around, doesn't mean we're not recycling. So that's a great thing. As far as the Schiller and Harrington are concerned, there's a lot of new stuff that's in it. What we're trying to do and what's mandated in both buildings that are going to be LEED certified is a green education module. So what we're working on are two different options. We're either going to have an app or we're going to have a website for both of those buildings that will show behind the scenes all of the energy efficient, sustainable materials and sustainable qualities of the building, the LEED qualities of the building. So we're hoping to roll something out with Harrington probably before the end of this year. And then with Schiller will more than likely be a little bit after the building is completed and open.
Great. Thanks so much, Bruce. There's one particular question that's so interesting, and it talks about the communication channels. And this question is from Takehito Kamata, professor at Sophia University in Tokyo, Japan. It is an open question. What communication channels, individual or organizational, would be more effective for us to share the information of sustainability and environmental ethics with students? So if any one of you could lay on in your thoughts, that's particularly important questions on communications. Anyone?
I'm not sure I have a good answer to that. I mean, it just seems to me that using things like faculty meetings and other communications like the BC newsletters, the update that comes every day, things like that, to sort of convey this message on a regular basis. The alumni, sending things out to alumni, really educating people about issues around sustainability and equity, combining those two, taking the integrated approach that Pope Francis really talked about, and using all of our social media channels to really talk about what BC is doing with respect to both the educational mission and the and you know, you look across campus, we have things like the Pulse program and all of the student service programs that are going on. These are amazing opportunities to really publicize both issues, how equity can be dealt with, how an educational institution can be tackling some of these things that have existed for a long time.
I agree. I echo with that. And I really feel the word integrated is important. There has to be multiple channels of communication at individual levels like emails, advertisement, and at organizational levels in classes and organizations and institutions.
And Anne-Marie, what do you think as a former student, what do you think are some of the best channels to get information? As someone who was so engaged in these topics, like what brought you out and what can we do?
Right. I think Sandra had a great point about incorporating more sustainability and ESG issues into classes, you know, not just in the environmental studies sphere, but more like it relates to every sort of major. So I think it's important to talk about those issues. And I think also, I mean, it would be wonderful if we had, you know, a training for first year students kind of to get some just sustainability legibility. I think that's lacking for a lot of people because you never know where they come from. And I think on the organizational level, I think it's really important to, you know, open up a dialogue between administrators and students. I know that Climate Justice has done a lot of work to try to open up this dialogue in terms of divestment and talking about these issues more with like the higher institutional level. So I think that all of those channels, mostly the organizational ones, I would argue, instead of the individual ones, are really important.
So we have one last question, right, Praveen? And this is, you have to answer quick because we're coming down to the end. And we like to just ask you in like one word or phrase, sustainability is a process, it's ongoing. We've done lots, but we have lots more work to do. So what's one thing that you would like to see initiated at BC? What's like in your, you know, dream for sustainability?
So is that a question for me? Or
no, for everyone, for our panelists. And then Praveen's gonna wrap this up.
How about we put this to the panelists?
Say again?
We can put the question to the panelists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions to our panelists. Yes.
I'd love to see a sustainability MBA program.
Cool.
I'd like to see a nature conservancy that we can partner with so that we can provide access to faculty and students on the ecological growth of wildlife. And that would grow more sustainable initiatives on campus.
Love it.
I'd like to see a teaching kitchen to increase food literacy and conscious eating.
Nice.
And I would say I'd like to see divestment, I think, from fossil fuels, you know, as a direct kind of mitigating action towards climate change.
Great. And as far as I'm concerned, I would love to see that all of these 4 insights really come true. And it's hard to believe that we have come to the conclusion of this great informative session that we had. Some of the key words that I would really want to kind of mention that we discussed was environmental justice, sustainability, recycling, systems change, activism, and the Schiller Institute. And to mentioning Schiller Institute, this is what our next segment on Show at 6 is going to be about, which will be on integration, design, and innovation, the Schiller Institute. And our panelists for this session would be Tom Childs, Vice Provost for Research and Academic Planning and Professor of Biology, Mary Nadon, our alum and Associate Vice President for Capital Projects Management, and Laura Steinberg, Seidner Family Executive Director, Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society. The hosts for this session would be Sunand Bhattacharya. He is the Associate Vice Provost for Design and Innovation Strategies, and Alejandra Sanchez from the class of 2021. This segment will be on August 4th, same time, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And I would really want to remind you that you need to register for each segment you want to attend. As you know, the registration is very simple and brief, but each segment has a very different link. So please check out our webpage, bc.edu/show@6, and see the next segments. And while you are at that webpage, you can find out all our archives where these previous segments are posted. Very important, be well, stay safe, and for now, good night from Boston College.
Thank you.
Thank you all.